At a time when world over we are talking about a global economic winter, we have a Chennai headquartered technology company that is doing exactly the opposite. I have with me the Chief Executive Officer of Zoho Corporation, Mr. Sridhar Vembu. Sridhar Vembu, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Welcome to Tenkasi.
Thank you so much for that. And working out of Tenkasi, which is in southern Tamil Nadu. What brought you here and why did you decide to work out of here first?
So we have our office for 11 years now, and that has been successful. We have about almost 1,000 people. That's there in Matalampare. It's about 25 kilometers from here. And I've always had the idea, a dream, that we have to develop these interior villages. We have to bring opportunities, technology to people here in these kind of villages. And we had bought this land. So I decided to move myself about three and a half years ago. And that's why I'm here.
So you're saying software need not be made only in Silicon Valley. It can be made anywhere. And you're also seeming to be turning on its head this idea that, you're of course an IIT graduate, but you don't need IITs and the top institutions to be making that kind of software.
I don't say we don't need, but I'm saying that there's talent in a lot of other places. And the talent has to be tapped. It can be tapped. That's what we are doing here in Tenkasi and in many other places now. And by now, it's a very proven model for us. It's working very well. Over nearly about 20% of our engineering workforce has come from our own Zoho Schools of Learning program. And that is accelerating now. And here, even in this remote village, we have started creating that school and then workshops and all of that so that we can train. In fact, one of our students is going to enter Zoho Schools of Learning next year, which is a big achievement for us because this is a very remote village. So,
the kind of profile of students that you're bringing in here, it's unimaginable. I mean, for them, of course, the dream of ultimately joining an MNC with the kind of reputation that you bring, 55 plus products in the market and some 12,000 employees. I mean, at a time when everyone's talking about laying off people, you seem to be talking about recruiting. How is that happening?
Well, we are recruiting slower now,
yeah.
But our vision is that when we ask employees for loyalty, have we earned it? That's a question I asked even 2 years ago during the Great Resignation. We cannot demand loyalty. We can only earn it. And so these are the tough times when if we stand by our employees. It's good for both long-term retention and also people can bet on technology. That is, learn technology, sustain it, and deepen their knowledge. As a result, our products deepen. And we have visibly seen this. Several of our products now are doing extremely well in the global markets against some really big multinational competition because the products have gotten really, really good. That's because our people have gotten really good. And they have gotten really good because they worked on this long term. So that's the equation. So you retain people long term by being loyal to them. And then the products get better, the company prospers.
Many of your employees who we have been meeting also have been long term with you, like you mentioned. And just in Tenkasi, you have developed Zoho Desk.
Yes.
Tell us about what are those elements that people otherwise in this kind of an industry are talking about, moving here and there and moving cities, and the big cities across the world is what they talk about.
Yeah, this, like as you noticed, so many of our people, and they've been with us 15 years, 20 years, all of it. And 5 years now, even in the rest of the industry, 3-4 years is the norm. While we are able to retain people, and that matters very much to our products. We are able to do this because there is a culture that we have built, and that's very visible in our office. And one of the key reasons, we don't believe in this whole measure and manage systems that are so common. If you look at traditional HR practices, extreme amount of measurements, ranking, stack ranking, they call it, a lot of the buzzwords. We throw out all of them. We treat employees first and foremost as intelligent human beings who have passion, who have interests, and that is how we retain. And once that culture takes root, then everything else magically happens. So it's important to keep that culture.
I'll come back to your Zoho Schools because even that's something so fascinating for us to understand, that you can recruit from anywhere and make them into people who are developing world-class products. But before that, you also were sharing with us earlier about the kind of revenue models that you have, that you actually don't spend, the kind of an institution that you have created, you have not marketed it as much perhaps. Otherwise, the world would be completely only be talking about this. I'm saying you don't spend on marketing. What's your revenue
We
model?
spend on marketing, but not as much as the competition. We spend maybe about 20%. Competition will spend 40, 50%, sometimes more. So there's a big difference, big gap. In the same way, we spend less on our whole infrastructure because we run our own infrastructure. So we economize on all those things, marketing, infrastructure spend, all that. We spend a lot on employees. We spend on the Zoho Schools of Learning. We invest in our people. So that's where the money goes, creating good facilities.
So a lot of money in the R&D, in the development
And the
itself.
R&D, taking care of our people holistically. So that's also important. For example, when one of our employees has a family emergency, the company comes to the aid. All of this is important to us. And that is because, we're human beings first and foremost, not just, there's a professional contractual relationship. It's really employment. I see it more than just a contract. There has to be a two-way commitment. The company has to show commitment in order to earn that commitment.
You have a presence across the world. I mean, some 25 countries you do business in, or you have clients in some
We
150
have
countries?
we have customers all over. We have now physical presence, our own offices in over 25 countries, and that's expanding rapidly in every continent, everywhere now. Particularly now, the BRICS countries and the global south, we are expanding very rapidly because our business is growing at a very fast clip there.
There are some interesting trends that you were talking to us earlier about. I want you to talk about them. The fact that most of your revenue is not based out of a US or the traditional, what people think are the markets. Explain to us how you have actually, in a sense, created an insurance policy against the kind of turmoil that those countries are seeing.
Over 10, 12 years ago, we decided to geographically diversify our revenue. If you looked at us 12 years ago, we were pretty much US and UK, Australia, centric in terms of revenue. Then we decided we need a much more geographic breadth in our revenue. Of course, India was very important. 12 years ago, our India revenue was minimal. It may not have amounted to more than 1 or 2%. Today, it is number 3 in the world revenue after US and European Union and then India. In fact, if you just see only countries, it will be US and then now India. But we're looking at European Union as a whole right now. And in fact, in 3 or 4 years, it will overtake European Union. India will become number 2 in revenue. That is a very impressive geographic breadth. Typically, if you look at SaaS companies, they may get 60-70% of revenue from US and Canada. And for us, that ratio is only about 40% or lower now. And the rest of the world is growing much, much faster. So we have both product diversity as well as geographic diversity, which we believe is very critical during uncertain economic times.
And the number of clients is much higher, not so much in terms of value you were saying.
Right. And yes, number of customers, the number of customers we have globally is over 650,000 now in the whole suite. And it's going to approach the million mark in the next year and a half. And that is very impressive for our size too. And of course, admitted, not all the customers are paying us very much, but it is very important to have these customers because now Zoho is well known there and we grow with them. And that is also happening. In fact, the growth in all of the geographies is because Zoho is the only company that will stand by them when they are very small. And then as they grow with us. And our product suite is very scalable. So we can go to tens of thousands of employees, hundreds of thousands of employees. So when they join us when they're 5 employees, then they grow. That growth naturally accrues to us too.
With so many companies talking about layoff, you're one company who is not. Tell us what is the secret.
Yeah. Our business has been conservatively run. We never carried any debt and we have always been profitable. So now during a downturn, it's a question of maybe we'll take a reduction in the profit margin. Maybe for 1 or 2 quarters, if necessary, we'll take a loss. And that is okay. This is something a public company cannot do. Because the CEO's job will be on the line if they say that. And that is why we stayed private. And so that is also part of the secret here is we stay private so we can sacrifice near-term profit in order to make sure that the employees are taken care of. And I believe that is a good long-term investment in our own future.
Was it your vision that you will never borrow money to do this, to do your business? I mean, where did it come from? Very traditional Tamil kind of conservative thought that you don't take money for a house or loan for a house?
These are the roots. It's like come from my parents. They never wanted to borrow money. And not borrowing is a kind of freedom. And we have it in our Kambaramayana. Kadan pattar nenjam pol kalanginan lange vendam. That is an analogy that in Kambaramayana where Ravana's predicament is, as though he were indebted. That is the analogy that Kambar gives in Kambaramayana. So this is a well-known phrase in Kambaramayana. So it's there in our culture here that you should not borrow money at all. Of course, not everybody follows it, but I've been rooted in that tradition.
And that has helped you stay strong.
Yes.
The basics,
and be resilient against adversity. As adverse events happen, it's your resilience that you can come back from a shock.
Tell me about your Zoho Schools itself. I mean, you seem to have kind of transformed, creating actually a social experiment, should I say. While you're a corporate, you're doing a massive social experiment in changing the face of, at least now, Tenkasi as a rural part of Tamil Nadu, rural part of India, and now you have plans to go elsewhere as well. Tell us about this. You have also plans to go to Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, and you think a big tech company can come out of there. Tell me.
So the Zoho Schools is born of the idea that there's a lot of latent talent. If you go to our government schools, you come to villages like this, there's a lot of talent that is waiting for that opportunity, waiting for someone to kind of unlock that talent there. And traditionally, nobody has invested in these places. And so people had to leave. The lucky ones, sometimes, they'll get an education and they'll leave. They'll go to Mumbai, they'll go to Bangalore, they'll go to Chennai. But so many are left behind. And I felt that if we bring that opportunity here, there is so much talent waiting to be tapped. And that was the hunch originally. You can think of it as like a scientific hypothesis. Now I can tell you that is absolutely proved. It is true. And why UP Bihar? That's one of the most demographically richest parts of India. So many children are born. We think of it population as a burden, but increasingly in our world where the number of children are declining, demographics is an asset. I mean, ask Japan, ask South Korea. They wish they had children, right? So we have a region where demographically rich companies should be there, flocking there to recruit, train, develop the skills, nurture the talent, all of it, and so much wealth can be created. That is why we are going there.
And the success stories also, you're able to bring those success stories from those youngsters. What are you doing to them? One of your teammates was telling me that there's no one who gets recruited and gets thrown out. They get repositioned in some other position. That I thought was so beautiful. I mean,
yes, we look for what a person can do well, not all the things that is. We look to pass a person, not fail a person. I'll put it that way. We look for what is there in that person that can be unlocked, and most often it works. I wouldn't say every case will work, but most often that approach works.
Post-pandemic, people thought of working out of this kind of thing, but your vision seems to have been much earlier. But did pandemic also kind of reaffirm that idea that, you can have delocalized, you can have, people not working out of a hub, an urban center? And is that something that you think should be the future?
Yes, and if you look at Zoho, the suite itself, it came from that small office, home office. Even 21, 22 years ago, the vision was that as broadband adoption spreads, we should be able to work from anywhere. This dream was there. Even 25 years ago, this dream was there. The technology has caught up. Now fiber optics, now 5G, all of that connectivity, it's all caught up. And physical infrastructure is catching up. Our highways are good. Our rural roads still need work, but they're getting better slowly. And so this means that you can actually work from anywhere. And the second fact, this is something very important about India. Our population density as a country is about 400 people per square kilometer. In Tamil Nadu itself is about 550, maybe closer to 600, which means that any square kilometer you draw, there are 500, 600 people easily. This is the same density as Santa Clara Valley, that is the Silicon Valley, which is considered urbanized, kind of a suburban area that has about the same density as Tenkasi district. So this is not so rural as we think. People clusters are there. If you take this clearly remote village, draw a 10, 15 kilometer circle, I bet you'll find 60, 70,000 people. So this is not, like no man's land here, which means the talent is there. We just have to find it, we have to nurture it, and we have to direct it, channelize in the right direction. This, I believe, can be done anywhere in India. And I won't be able to do it everywhere in India. I wish I could, but we want to demonstrate it in a few places. Then other people can do it in other places.
So Tenkasi, you're saying, is a replicable model?
Yes, it is. It requires that commitment from the entrepreneurs. You first have to believe. That's what I always say. It starts with the belief that we can do it. It's not just true about this model. It's also true about building any complex product. Why would we think that we can build this product? It's very complex. Only a Google or Microsoft can do it. Why would we think we can do it? That belief has to be there, that self-belief. That's where it starts.
All your thinking now has been based on giving those skills to the youngsters so they can be ready for this world. But the big disruptor was once the pandemic, I guess. But now we are talking about AI. And do you see that as a big disruptor? You've just written a letter along with some others. Please share with us those details. When at a time when all global biggies seem to have come together to say pause AI for so many months, do you go with that theory?
There are two fears about it. One is the technology itself, this AGI they call it, where it is fully, human-like powers, or even more than human, superhuman powers. And will that superhuman-powered AI, would it want to, for example, harm humanity? There's no guarantee, because we would not be able to understand why it is doing something, and that is a risk. That is one kind of risk.
It's a real fear.
That's a risk. Then there is a second type of risk. That is an economic disruption, where people who we don't want to become passive consumers of whatever the AI produces, because then we'll have to go into debt to whoever controls that AI. That's economic risk. In that sense, you are looking at the AI as a capital goods. And I'm saying India has to have a stake in those capital goods. Our government should know the economic potential, both the opportunity and the threats it poses. And it has to be audited, regulated. There has to be some public accountability for this kind of technology. Exactly the same way with nuclear weapons or cloning or any of those technologies. See, today
but that needed a global understanding, isn't it? When you put a moratorium on cloning, gene technology,
yes,
or even NPT. I mean,
yes,
we need
NPT,
global understanding.
And this debate has started now, particularly after this ChatGPT and GPT-4, all of that. People have sparked the debate. We are joining the debate from India, and we are also urging Indian policymakers to be aware of this. We must debate this. We must have these discussions in academia, in our industries, in our enterprises, all of it, so that collectively we as citizens understand the risks involved, understand the opportunities, and put this technology to our benefit, human benefit. That's what is important.
So you also speak about, even in your tweets, you've spoken about democratizing this AI as a technology. And does that mean that we don't want big players to come in and become monopolies here? Because there has been a tendency, isn't it, in the past about...
We definitely don't want monopolies, whether it's foreign players or Indian players or any player. We don't want monopolies in this. And that means that it's very much a public policy question. Monopoly, some people pretend that it's somehow a purely economic issue. It is not. It's always a political economy issue. What do policymakers allow? And some countries have stringent regulations, and they generally operate better. In India, we have had stiff, competition laws, and therefore, for example, in the internet, we have some of the lowest, data prices in the world, and our UPI works very well for our citizens.
Actually, I want you to tell people of the country about it, because we fail to appreciate where we are sitting and what we are having. Please tell us about that India story, which you seem to be quite...
UPI is a massive success, massive, truly massive. The volumes it handles and the level of access. You can literally go to, corner street vendor near this village. You can pay with your phone. It's just incredible to see this. At zero cost to the vendor, zero cost to you as a consumer. That's an incredible achievement. And we have leveraged all of the investments in the networking, all of that, to enable this. And if you see the technology, the bits transferred, it's not like a huge amount of data. But to get all this stuff working and together and the banks integrated, that's a significant public policy and technology achievement. We must celebrate it. Similarly, now ONDC is a very nascent effort to reduce the tax that these platforms, tax on the merchants and the consumers. Because the tax can be as much as 40%. If some small merchant from Tenkasi wants to sell on these online platforms, they may have to pay as much as a 40% tax. I call it a tax because it is a tax. And why can't we reduce it? Why can't it be like 1 or 2%, maybe 3%? And this has to be a goal of public policy. And this is what digital public goods is all about. And I believe AI should be treated the same way. It is a digital public good. Public policy should get involved. Our private citizens should get involved as contributors to this whole commons. And then so that everyone has access to it. So that UPI vision is a very good one. We should adopt it for AI as well.
This UPI vision that you spoke about, I think most Indians are not aware. I mean, they would think maybe the West also, it must be working the same way. With your transnational experience, I wanted to talk about how it is so much of an advantage, because such a big population and we are now presuming that digital can happen everywhere.
Yeah, I think that we take this for granted in our country, but it's not true. If you go to the US, payments, a merchant collecting payments online could cost 3.5%-4% of their revenue. Sometimes their entire profit margin may be 7-8%, and they're shipping half of it for these payments, enabling payments. It's still true. And so it's not, no, this did not happen in India by some accident. We have to thank the visionary people, both in government and in private citizens who got this done. The IndiaStack.org, iSpirit, all these organizations deserve a lot of credit for this, along with the visionary government that enabled it. And the same thing we have to do in AI. That is what we are calling for right now. As of today, in fact, we'll release we'll show you the press release soon. We are calling for that same type of effort where our government, our private sector, our institutions like universities come together to create this digital public good in AI.
Okay, just one last thing. This famous story about how you wanted to create a headquarters in Texas and then converted that into a farm. Is that something that the pandemic gave you the vision for, or is it something that you see should be the norm everywhere? Because where we have been seeing now also, you are trying to create those kind of islands.
We got that land in Texas before the pandemic. And then, a lot of people work from home, and then we created the farm itself because that's an open space. It's kind of safe to come rather than an enclosed space. So a lot of our employees in Texas wanted to come to that open space. Then we gave them a little patch to farm themselves, take the produce home. That's still the model we follow there. Now we have an office there as well. So you can also work and you can farm your little patch like a kitchen garden and take the produce home. And that has taken off in our Texas, Austin office. And here we have a farm, of course. So we have a love for farming because it's a lot of open space in the end. And I do believe our human beings need that space to be mentally, physically healthy. So that's where it comes from. And we have to be closer to our food. When food changes hands 18 times, it loses nutrients. So in fact, you would have tasted the difference today. I mean, our food in our canteen here, it's very fresh. It came right from here to the table. So that's important. And for all the technology, all of that, we should not forget the basics.
And perhaps that's one of the big urban problems also, isn't it? When we talk tech, it's always the big centers, big companies we're talking about, and all coming together as a hub. Whereas you create another kind of hub and, spoke and hub. Tell us about that model that you're thinking about and what's your expansion plan on that? Tenghazi is one with the spokes.
Yeah. So we are creating this hub and spoke model where Matalampare here Tenghazi, that is one hub. The hub is going to have about 1,000 people soon. And hub means that we have all of the services we expect, from networking to maybe HR group and our finance group. All of them are present so that we have, and our transportation is good, our food is good, we have good chefs, all of that. While the village I'm in, we call it a spoke. And for the Tenghazi hub, there are like 3 or 4 spokes right now attached. Each spoke may have only like 10, 20 employees, but it's very much attached to the hub. If there are important meetings, I go to the hub. Otherwise, people come here for small meetings, but when there's a big meeting or multiple groups have to meet, we go to the hub. So this hub and spoke model is what we are replicating. One near Madurai, one in Tirunelveli, one in the Trichy area, one in the Coimbatore area. And this same hub, we want to take it to North UP. That is the goal.
Okay, so very upbeat on what you're saying, and all of us watching you with great interest.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for what you're doing and showing us perhaps the path forward, because all of us, even post-pandemic, perhaps some enlightenment has come about that we can't really put all our eggs in one basket and need to learn to live in other ways. So that was the conversation with Mr. Sridhar Vembu, who's doing some experiments that perhaps the entire global community is watching very closely. In Tenghazi with camera person Nagraju, Uma Sudhir, NDTV.